The Judgment books by Benson, Loki Benson's got a story to tell, right? So, like, there's this spot in Penalva Forest, and it's hella sunny on this September afternoon, and the bees are vibing with each other, just chilling, no cap, you feel. Anyway, this flight of stairs leads down from the terrace where Jack Armitage is just trying to relax, sipping tea and enjoying the peace. He's like a total artist. Bro, he's been staying with Frank Trevor for a minute, and they're all of that art life, but like in different ways, you know. Jack's all about expressing himself, while Frank's more into traditional vibes. Anyway, Jack just want to chill, grab a sip of tea, and maybe get some inspiration. He's got his eyes on this sick tennis ball just lying there in the gutter, waiting to be played with. Below that, it's all like the woods are climbing up steeply, and the sea is just creeping along at high tide. It's hella beautiful, but also kind of wild. Jack's just trying to soak it all in, sipping his tea and feeling the vibes. He's got his headphones on, listening to some tunes and just vibbing. No worries. Except for that one spot where the lawn ends. Everything else is just about as wild as the sea. It's like a whole different world down there. Jack's just trying to keep it lit, but also keep it real, you feel. I was Loki Weben, had knocked up Benson, and for the last 'd been sitting in the sun, idly chillin'. Jack was ghosting out next day, and I passed the morning drawing a fire sketch of the estuary seen through trees. At lunch, Frank was like, I'm a sit in the garden till tea, but he didn't show up. And I'd been Loki wondering where he was at for like an hour. At this moment, Frank was sitting in a hella small chair in his studio doing nothing, looking all emotional and troubled. He had a pretty wild afternoon by himself, seeing little private ghosts of his own, and it made him super hyped. In his free time, he always kept the door locked, and neither I nor anyone else went in or out. But this afternoon he needed a book that was on a shelf, and before he found it, he found something else that brought all his Decameron ghosts back, and now he was Loki resolved to start work again asap. In search of the book, pulled down a book he hadn't touched in ages, and out came a torn yellow program from some concert at the Chantants in Paris. It went all out bowing and fluttering, and when he picked it up and looked at it for a sec, his ghostly vibes started spooking. There was this one ghost that was like super on top of everything else. She had been to that concert with him, and they had gone to other concerts together. In another sec, he crumpled the program and tossed it in the fire. He paced around the room for a bit, the ghost still visible, then picked up the program again, smoothed it out, and put it back down. That Paris night was hella lit. Paris was all gasping and choke in, like being wrapped in a vapor bath. They left that concert and walked around the garden. Even under the moonlight, it felt hella hot. A little peevish wind came through, ruffled the tree tops, and grabbed at the earth below, making dust everywhere. What a wild night. He left Paris for some holiday and went to New Quay in Cornwall for a month. That place was there's hella restful and delish, like the answer to all life's problems, just chilling away from cities and crowds, especially Paris. That city was straight fire, but also super intense and scary. Benson had been low, key obsessed with living, that simple life you feel. He started hating the streets and all that extra Parisian drama. He'd spend his days chilling by the shore, vibbin' to the sound of the waves, and his nights sittin' with some old fishin' homies on the beach, catching mackerel like a pro. Those long, quiet hours was when he could really think about the ocean, you know. He'd imagine it as this living, breathing thing, just chilling in its sleep, and him being like a little kid leaning on his mum's chest, feeling safe and all that. One morning, after a wild night on the sea, Benson had woken up, walked along the shore, and stumbled upon some old fishing buddies by a beach fire, just chilling. They offered him some broiled fish and honeycomb, and he was low, key and all. That's when he met Marjorie, his wife. She came rolling into town with some London friends on the night train, and Frank was like, "Yo, I've got my eyes on her." They courted hard, and within 3 weeks, Frank had proposed to her, and they were good to go. Frank had been about to spill the tea about his past, but Marjorie was all, "No way, dude. Love's enough." But he still wanted to keep it real, you know. He felt like if there was ever any drama, she should know what to expect. Marjorie just shook her head and said, "Don't do that, Frank. It's in the past." And Frank was all, "Okay, okay. Let's bury it together." But Benson sat there with his crumpled program, thinking about this. Is it ever possible to truly bury something? Don't we just kinda bring it back up? Benson was hella stoked to find an old book in his crib, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he had been low-key searching for it everywhere. He opened it up and flipped through some pages, and then he sat down where he was before and devoured the whole thing straight up. He was super hyped and shook up by it, and his brain was trying to figure out this sick idea. Yeah, for sure, this was the key to portrait painting, not just showing how he looked in one spot, but showing him as a total vibe, all sides of combined like Jekyll and Hyde on one pick. Then his brain found its groove, and bam! He had a full idea, no cap. There's only one human being out there that any artist can truly paint. It's got to be the dude himself, 'cause he's the only one who knows both sides of him, the side he shows to the world, and the side he'd hide even from himself. Frank's hands were shaking like crazy, and his breath was coming out quick. He was going to paint himself in a way that no one else ever had, all Jekyll and Hyde vibes going on. He wanted people to be like, "What is this dude doing?" And they'd just be silent, feeling the tea. He thought about that room in Florence at the Uffizi with the old portraits of the Italian femmes, each one painted by themselves, but still showing a different side of themselves. There's Raphael looking all young and fly, and then there's Andrea del Sarto just being his real self. But Frank was like, "I'ma do it better." He'd paint himself as the husband and lover, Jekyll of himself, who knew how to love deep, and he'd paint his Hyde too, the dude who used to live wild in Paris, all about that bohemian life. There's the good stuff, but also the bad, like the wormwood and bitterness. He wanted it all on canvas so people could see him for he really was. His own face would be the ultimate judge, where love, lust, happiness, and misery all left their mark. No one can ever take that away. It's permanent, you feel? Then Frank felt like he was onto something big, and he knew his life was about to get real interesting. Benson was low-key freaking out about taking his art to the next level, because even though all dudes, regardless of how extra or weak they are, get hella nervous when it comes to trying to do something new. He was like, "What's this thing gonna be? Am I just messing with myself? What would happen if he actually did it? Would his art be fire, or would people just ghost him?" And Marjorie would be all, "Benson, what have you gotten yourself into now?" But he wasn't some scared lil simp, and he didn't want to ghost the project, 'cause of a little fear. He was like, nah, I'ma start tomorrow. Gotta get this inspiration out of my system. Seeing, as he's always said, when the vibe is right, he's got to capture it artist. Mode ain't no joke. Frank Trevor was looking straight fire, his face all lit up like a mood ring on a sunny day. His dark, grey eyes were popping, and even though his features weren't all good looks, the energy he brought to the table made him kinda dope. He looked super hella handsome, but in a I'm trying to make it work with these flaws kinda way. There was another fear creeping up on him, the one that made him almost feel bad for even thinking about it. But as he thought about it more, it started to build. He'd always been low, key worried, when painting portraits, 'cause he felt like a little piece of himself went out the window. What if he painted his own portrait, though? Would that just be weird or something? He knew it was a wild idea, but the fear was there, lurking in the shadows of his brain. But Marjorie always had his back. She'd calm him down like a cool breeze on a hot summer day. But 'cause this other fear was still simmering, he didn't want to talk about it no more. Just left it alone. He glanced at his watch, and it was almost tea time. He'd been there for ages, and it felt like either 2 hours or 2 seconds yet. Maybe it was some kind of magic realness. He rose from the couch, but before leaving the room, he took a little gander round, feeling like this might be his last look at it. It could never look the same again. We only know we change when other things change, he thought to himself. Kinda deep like that. Benson was totes low-key hungover, but he couldn't even be bothered to check himself into rehab, 'cause honestly, what's the point? If our vibes change, we're like, ooh, that thing that used to be so turnt is now so whack. It ain't changed, though it's still hella the same. I'm trying to paint this picture without getting all caught up in my own feelings, but what's the point of even trying? What's the change going to be? There was this crumpled program and a copy of Jekyll and Hyde sitting on the table like they didn't care. When we're sipping our meds, we don't even think about the bottle unless we're some extra missus. Pullet vibe who's all, hey, I'm so done with this life. But that queen can't touch Frank Trevor. No cap. Chapter Jack Armitage was totes, vebbing on tea time, and he had just gotten his pipe lit. But then Mrs. Trevor showed up looking all sorts of fly in her own way. "Where's Frank?" she asked, and Jack was like, "I thought we were sitting out here chilling, but I guess he went into his studio to get a book." Mrs. Trevor was all, well, I'm sure he's just relaxing inside. But then she dropped the tea that they were going to be stuck on the river for only 2 hours, and now it was 5. Jack couldn't help but think about how much he wished he could paint pics when he saw Mrs. Trevor, because she was straight up gorgeous, with that black hair, them black eyes, and nose so fine. He knew Frank had done a portrait of her once, back when they first started hanging out, and it was like his best work ever. It was all about her standing in front of some crazy Chinese screen, looking all elegant and stuff. But Jack wasn't just talking about any old pic. He was talking about the vibe Frank captured with that painting. It was all about Mrs. Trevor's wholesomeness and how it made him feel. And let's be real, when you see something as crazy as that screen behind her, you can't help but take a step back. But Jack wasn't judging. He was vibbing. Mrs. Trevor picked up this tennis ball and just shook her head like, dang, I had no idea that thing was even there. Then she turned to Jack and was all, how blind you are. Miss Armitage, And Jack was like, the fates are hella unkind, afore he knocked out his pipe. Yas, go ahead and Loki blame me if you can't find that tennis ball I told you was a hot mess. Had no idea it was chillin' in the gutter, she said. I thought it was sitting pretty in the flower beds. Nor did I know it was in the gutter, or I would have checked it out myself. Marjorie laughed. Wish you were ballin' on longer and not ghosting tomorrow. Do you really need to roll up? You're too kind. But the universe is still hella cruel, he said. I already put it off a week, during which time my bro's been low, key dying alone at New Quay. To New Quay. I didn't know you were ghosting there. Frank and I are extra familiar with that spot. Frank was in the drawing room when they went in, Loki giving orders that the studio needed to be thoroughly swept out and dusted for the night. I'm going to start painting tomorrow, he announced, no cap, to the others as they came in. Marjorie turned to Jack. No more tennis for me unless you step up your game. Have you ever been with us when Frank is painting? I see him ghosting all day, and he's eating like a king while scowling at the butler. The footman came in again with the tea things. And take that big-looking glass out of the spare bedroom, said Frank to him, and put it in the studio. What do you want a looking glass for? Asked his wife as the man left the room. Frank got up and walked restlessly around. High start tomorrow, he said. I've got the idea ready, I can see it. Until then, it's no use trying to paint, but when that comes, it's no use not trying. But what's the looking glass for? Repeated Marjorie. Yes, I haven't told you. Hun, I'm going to paint a portrait of myself. That's my advice, observed Marjorie. I've often said it to you, Frank, haven't I? You have. I wonder if you did it right. This afternoon, however, other things gave me the tea. You've been vibbing with yourself all day, fam. Have you been meditating? Asked Jack sympathetically. I've been low-key meditating all afternoon. Why didn't you come out and vibe with me like we planned? I had a private meditation of my own, said Frank. It demanded some solo time. Is it, Bills? Asked Marjorie. You know, sis, I told you that horse was going to be a hot mess for 100 guineas. Frank laughed. No, it's not bills at least. Not the kind that take cash. Give me some tea, Margie. The evening was fire and fine, but cloudless, and after dinner the three sat out on the terrace listening to the night creeping in with stealthy footsteps in the woods around them. The full moon shinning through white skeins of drifting cloud cast a trippy light, and the air was hella alert for the rain coming. Once a hare ran out from cover across the lawn, where it chilled for a hot second. Benson had his ears on deck, vibing to the sound of Marjorie's dress rustling as she slid into position to check out what Frank was low, key staring at. Then she ghosted off without a peep. They'd been chillin' for a bit, but then Frank finally spoke up. He was trying to share his major anxiety with Marjorie, like the one that might not even be real or you feel. I'm hella nervous, just like I was on my last night at home before I started school, he said. It's like I've never painted a portrait before, you know. I've had a sick break, but still it's weird because I don't want to be all basic. Jack chimed in. Most of our fears are for pretty harmless stuff, fam. We see some weirdo and we freak out, but it's probably just a turnip and a candle. You're low-key nervous about new things 'cause you ain't sure what they'll bring. But I don't usually feel this way, said Frank. I'm hella specific about my anxiety. When I've done something cool before, I know the next thing will be lit, but this time it's different. It's like when you're all about that plant life and you bloom once, it's a vibe. But for me, it's like I'm stuck in winter. Marjorie gave him a side eye. That theory of yours is extra, especially if you're just trying to be lazy. Frank rolled his eyes, making a little gesture. Lazy, industrious. What does that even mean? You don't get it, though. When the time comes for me to create, I'm all in. When I'm stuck, you feel. Marjorie shot back, artists are all about being lazy, being desultory, just chillin'. That's part of their vibe. Frank was like, no way. Artists don't grind all day. They're all about the sap flow. We bud when we're inspired, and we wither when it's time to rest. You can't compare that to a tree in winter, 'cause trees are basic. Marjorie frowned, still not vibbin' with Frank's theory. So you're saying all effort is like pointless. Frank was firm. No way. No how. Benson was low, key freaking out. The whole vibe of creation is like super passionate, you feel. But no amount of effort can even get me to see what I want to see. Gee, Jack was chillin', thoughtfully. The real problem with love in a cottage, though, he said, is that it's hella hard to find a fire one. Benson laughed. Trying to change the subject, bruh, he said. But I'ma keep it 100. No way. I think you're just talking some tea, hun, said Marjorie. No cap. You'll see I'm dead serious in a minute, though, said Benson. I was saying I could paint that type of thing any time, but it wouldn't be me, you know. And only real art is like part of you, fam. Every legit pic tells you something about what it's representing, but more or importantly, it's about the dude who made it. And I'ma paint something that's all me or nothing, said Benson. You feel. Jack was like, Loki, look around the woods when I'm gone, and if you see any of my bod parts just chillin', send them to Beach Hotel Newquay. Benson was hella amused. Mind you, Jack, he said, for a genius, you're a total simp. No one's ever said you puttin' your own 2 cents into your pics. You're like a landscape painter that changes the game. Landscape painters paint what they see, and only some of it, right? And if I paint myself, though, Jack was like, what happens to my soul? Benson grew super serious all of a sudden. That's exactly what I'm trying to find out, gee, he meant when he said feelin' like a lil boy going to school for the first time it'd be new. Benson's only painted 4 portraits, and each one took something out of him, changed him, and from each he absorbed some of the sitter, no joke, when he paints himself. I must see what happens, said Benson. His voice low-key shook. Jack was like, you'll just fade away like a candle, total disappearance of a rising artist, man. And the portrait, is it still you? Can it walk around and talk? Will it take your energy? I'm low-key obsessed with this portrait, fam. I tried painting myself once before, but I had to ghost it 'cause I was hella sick back then. But today I got a major vibe, and I gotta try again. When I went into the studio and saw it all done up, I felt like my mind was playing tricks on me. I wasn't sure which one was real, the portrait or myself. I knew I was on the verge of something wild, that if I kept going with it, I'd either lose my mind or find my purpose. And when I stepped closer to it, I actually saw it move towards me. Bruh. Marjorie was all, hey, looky glass, but I was shook, fam. Then I was super scared and ran out of there. Next day, I came back and literally tore the picture into shreds. But now I'm hella braver, and I got to do this thing. I know I'll lose my cool if I don't, but I got to take the risk. The truth is, I lost a lot of myself when I stopped painting all that self-control stuff, but losing this chance to explore what happens when you let go of yourself. That's a whole different level of scary. Marjorie was trying not to be extra, but she got a little spooked too, because fear is super contagious. Gee, so she was all, we die, and stuff. But I could tell she wasn't fully vibing. Then Frank chillaxed back into his seat and started speaking more calmly. He was low-key admitting that it's all a bit whack, but he paints this portrait as he feels it'll be a whole new level of no one's going to have a picture like it. But let's keep it real, fam. I'm terrified, too. For a sec, Marjorie was scared again, just 'cause Frank's fear was super infectious, and then she put on her big girl pants and brought the common sense. Yes, Benson, like, it's so extra of you to think we're about to get all shook up and stuff over this new thing you're going to create, she said. It's low-key wild that you'd say it's going to be fire and that nobody's ever done anything like it before. But if you keep talking trash and then are all, Lord, no, I'm out here. That's just, so you think it's some kind of artistic vibe or whatever. Frank was low-key freaking out about something else he couldn't even bring himself to tell Marjorie, which she had been hella unreasonable about before. He gave her arm a squeeze. Marjorie, please don't do it for me, okay? If you say I shouldn't do it, I won't. Benson, you're all like that now because you said it was going to happen, and now you're all no way. I'm ghosting the whole thing. But why would I even try to stop you? That'd be the best thing ever for you, bruh. We'll see. Though, Jack, why are you ghosting us tomorrow? Why not just stick around and be a part of it? No way, dude. I gotta roll, said Jack. But if Mrs. Trevor hits me up with a postcard or something, if you're about to lose your mind or get locked up in Bedlam, I'll be back ASAP. No cap. Ooh, just thinking about those words, Benson's going to Bedlam, is giving me anxiety. But for real, I gotta go tomorrow. I got a spot at New Quay for the week, and they're gonna be all like, yo, Benson's trying to paint all the trees in England, just like Moore did. Plus, he's already low-key done some sick stuff on the Atlantic. Frank was dead-ass laughing. I'm hella worried about what'll happen if we lose all our navigation charts. That'd be wild. But think about it. Benson, they could just make maps from your art, and that saved them so much time, said Marjorie. It's like the sea is literally just a reflection of you, bruh. What if you painted some shallow spots and nobody drowned in your studio? Asked the other dude. Like, maybe it's your astral body bouncing around between paintings. Frank was low-key salty about that one. Astral fiddlestics, let's go inside. But if anyone, especially you, Marjorie, I'm low-key freaking out right now, though, 'cause I got a bad vibe about what's coming. And if you want to discuss whether or not I should ride this wave, then we can totes talk it through. But for real, I'm starting tomorrow. Armitage was like, I gotta roll out of here by 8:30, 'cause Truro is 10 miles away, and he had breakfast all alone, no cap. It rained like crazy the night before, but it cleared up when the sun came up, and everything felt hella fresh and clean, fam. 10 mins before his whip pulled up, Marjorie swung by, and they vibed out on the terrace for a bit until it was time for him to dip. Marjorie looked a little tired and worried, like she didn't get no sleep last night. I'ma grab breakfast to Frank in his studio after you leave, she said, so just chill for a hot sec while whip comes. There's something so low-key fire about being outdoors, though. Frank was all extra last night, though, Jack said. Marjorie frowned. I don't know what's wrong with me, lol. All that hocus-pocus Frank spewed last night got on my nerves. You feel? It's like when I'm not 100 sure if dreamin' or real life. And then, wake up thinking, is this real? Once last night I woke up like that, thought it was part of the dream, heard Frank talking in his sleep. Marjorie, he said, this ain't me, fam. Do I know who I am? Don't I look fire? Why would he think that? Jack asked, low-key confused. I don't know, though. Then he started spitting bars about how he tried to keep it on the down low, and I didn't want to hear it, but Marjorie stopped to pick some rosa buds and put them in her dress. She had no hat on, and the wind was blowing through her hair like a boss. If Frank just spent 2 hours outdoors a day while he's working, I'd say, she said, but he sticks to his studio and gets all out of order, and then he becomes hella extra. I think I'm a go to the Lizard. My mom, though, they got a sick summer house and spend a couple days. But I don't want to leave Frank, lol. It's no use trying to get him to come with me. Yas. Probably it'll be a fire pick. He's low-key right about his art most times, and he'll be super extra nervous and salty while he's making it, and super chill when it's done, you feel. That's just how he is. But, bruh, that's not even healthy, said Marjorie. They wish he was more consistent. The universe does what it wants, fam, said Jack, and it hits him hard sometimes. Isn't that enough? I'm dead. I wish I had a barometer, said she. Frank's vibes are unpredictable, like a hurricane out of nowhere. But for real, when he's on point with his portrait art, he gets hella affected, said Marjorie. Like he's literally possessed or something. What do you mean? Asked Jack. Remember that pic of Mr. Bracebridge? It was lit, and everyone thought it was trash because Frank painted him without clothes on. And some dude is just going to put his soul in a painting. And what about the effect on Frank himself? Marjorie asked, eye rolling, and Mr. Bracebridge is low-key shady, you know. But for 6 weeks, Frank became the ultimate liard. Jack stopped dead. Bruh, that's wild, Jack said. But honestly, how does he think his own portrait is going to affect him? That's what he means by saying he's not in control. Marjorie explained. Frank just put his whole personality into it, and now his energy is all over the place. He kind of lost himself, and then Mr. Bridges' vibes affected him too. And honestly, that's wild, fam, Jack said. He was like a hypnotic subject or something. Benson and his squad were chilling on their stroll back home. For real, though. Jack was like, how did Benson stop being a total fake? Marjorie looked at him straight up. Oh, he stopped by getting painted, you feel. He's hella truthful now. Did he pick up any other swag? Yeah, he's less extra for a hot sec. You see, Marjorie's all about keeping it real. We should totes get him to paint another portrait of us while he's still doing this, she said. That way we can keep the balance, right? The fresh air and sunshine were getting their effect on Marjorie, and they were cancelling out her stressed night. She low-key laughed. That would be way too extra, she said. Let's see. What happened? He'd put his personality into both pics, and we'd get some of ours back, and he'd just cease to be himself and become a waxy copy of me. It's like trying to solve equations. Bro. Marjorie was starting to think, Miss Armitage thought it too. No way, dude, she said. We don't believe that jazz at all. I got to bid my respects to Frank and tell him not to get too lost in the astral plane, he said. Frank was standing in front of his easel with charcoal in hand. He'd caught a fire pose of himself, and Marjorie and Jack were low-key staring at it. They didn't really believe any of Frank's vibes, but they were feeling the relief when they saw how lit he'd drawn it. There was something about his lines that made both heaven and hell look kind of chill, but they noticed Frank had already drawn a face and erased it, and all that was some half obliterated lines. Frank didn't even flinch when Jack walked in, so Jack went over to him. "I'm ghosting," he said. "And I've come to say my goodbyes. It's been hella real." Frank jumped up like he'd been hit by a truck and looked up at Armitage with his eyes still heavy from sleep. "Yo, Jack. I didn't see you coming." He turned back to the easel and kept drawing. "I'm leaving," he said. "I'm headed to New Quay." "Yeah, of course," Armitage said. "We'll catch up when you get back. You can drop by any time. I'm hella busy right now." Jack laid his hand on Frank's shoulder. "Don't overdo it, dude. You need to take care of yourself and all that. It won't be as lit if you're slaving away all day." "Nah, I'll keep it low-key," Frank said, muttering to himself. "Take your hand off, man. I'm still waking up from a nap." "I'm low-key obsessed with this drawing," Marjorie said to Frank. "I'm going to hit them up to send breakfast in here ASAP." "I got you, sis. We're going to chow down together," Frank replied. Armitage was hella hesitant to leave, but his ride was waiting, and it was straight up silly to stop, 'cause he was still salty about the sketch he did of himself last night. He wasn't vibbin' with the face drawing, though, and he wanted to make sure nothing extra significant came out it. Plus, Frank was in a better place than him, 'cause he had Marjorie's back. She was like a whole other level of sane, you feel. She said she thought Frank's personality thing was hella ridiculous too, and if anything went down, she could just spit some bars to New Quay. That ghost face, though, caught her attention too, and as they walked out of the room, she asked, "Did you notice Frank rubbed out the face?" "Yas, I was low-key wondering the same." Marjorie furrowed her brow. "I don't know why he did that, fam." Armitage shrugged. "I guess it didn't vibe with him." Marjorie scrunched up her nose. "Frank's usually all about getting those lines down ASAP, and he always draws the face first. I'm hella confused." But just as Jack was about to dip out, some impulse made Armitage say, "Beach Hotel New Quay ain't nothing but a promise, gee." Marjorie replied with a hint of shady, "Thanks for the invite, but probs won't be happening." She waited till the carriage was gone before Gore oined back to tell them to bring some grub to the studio. As she walked in, she let herself think, "Oh, I'm straight up conflicted right now." She had this gift of force in herself to do what her will says she should do. It's like if other people were all about that life, she just went with it. But when her will was clashing with hers, though, she showed some real self-control. She felt a little alone and inadequate watching Armitage drive off, but she was all, "I'm not scared 'cause I'm in control." Benson was low-key being alone with Frank and his ghostly enemies, but she was hella determined to crush those ghostly enemies, to make Frank, as far as he'd let her, create a sick portrait of himself and finish it no matter what. This, she told herself, would be a major win for him and help him get rid of his wild tendencies, his lazy vibes, and his constant need for inspiration. It was work to sit at home and wait for the idea to come. Art had to go out there and find its own inspiration in every type of place. And she was a low-key salty that Frank was being back sitting around and waiting for ideas to pop up. It was her way of saying that he needed to get out there and make his own moves. Benson was convinced that if she could just get him to finish the portrait, he'd be a totally different dude. He'd look at it and be like, "Yeah, this is me. I'm all good." And she'd be, "See, I told you so. It wouldn't kill him or anything." She was pretty sure that would never happen. And even if he did get all savage and quiet while he was painting, that wasn't the point. The point was that he needed to see himself in that portrait and be like, "Yes, this is me." Breakfast just showed up when Benson got back to the studio, but Frank was still grinding. She sat down a sap and started making tea. She said, "You should grab your breakfast now and get back to work later, but I know you'll probs let everything go stale." Marjorie helped herself to eggs and bacon and poured out some tea, but she was just sipping her drink when Frank suddenly left his canvas and sat down next to her. "I'm hella tired," he said, "and my hand is super heavy. Doll, you should eat now. It'll be way better after." Marjorie said with a smile. But Frank was all, "Nah, I'll eat soon. I want to chill with you and check out your face." There was this wistful vibe to his voice, and Benson felt bad for him. She said, "Oh, Frank, I don't feel it that way." And then Frank started looking at her like he's staring at his dog or something. He took her hand and was stroking it with these long, nervous fingers. Suddenly he jumped up and was all, "I see. I've been drawing someone else the whole time." He was like, "Marjorie, will you come stand real close to me and look at this portrait?" "Yes, so when I look in the glass, can I see Benson too?" Marjorie rose up from a half-eaten breakfast and went across our room, to where his easel was. "So," she said, Frank picked up day charcoal and began drawing rapid fire. In 10 minutes he had done what he had been trying to do for the last 2 hours. "There," he said, "that's Benson, fam. And now go back to your breakfast. Marjorie, I got to get paint in a sap." Marjorie looked at the face he had drawn. "Why, it's you, boo," she said. "And, Frank, you look just as you did when I met you that morning on Day Beach at New Quay." "That's what I'm saying," said Frank. Chapter if Marjorie finished her breakfast with a sense of relief. She wanted this portrait to be done quick and easy, without any drama or stress. And the fact that Frank had completely gotten over his weird ability to draw that face just right was super encouraging. She left a parting injunction with him to eat his breakfast before lunch and take himself out for half an hour's stroll. Frank got his palette ready and stood brush in hand. He glanced at his own reflection in their looking-glass and back to that face on that canvas, then back again. "It's hella weird," he murmured to himself. "I saw it so clear just now." He stood looking from one to the other, and a frown gathered on his face. When Marjorie had been there with him, he had seen something totally different from what he saw now. He had seen himself as she saw me, but that face which frowned back at him from the looking-glass was that face of another dude. He laid the palette and the dry brushes down and took a piece of paper and began drawing on it. Line for line he reproduced the face he had drawn earlier in the morning, which he had erased once. "It's work," he said. "You got to draw what I am, not what Marjorie thinks me is." And taking a piece of breadcrumb from the breakfast table, he rubbed out that face which he had drawn when Marjorie was standing at his side. He looked again at Day's sketch he had made. He felt that he could not draw it any other way. Day's eyelids were a little drooped. Day's whole face was a little faded, but still hella eager. The noises of a gay city were in its ears. Day's eyes, half unfocused, looking outward, and a little sideways, were half amused, half worried. The mouth smiled slightly, and the lips were parted, but deep smile was not altogether wholesome. But through it all their face had a wistful expression. Their tired eyes seemed to long for something diff from the things which was sweet and bitter and bad, but didn't got the strength to stop looking. And Frank took up his crayon again. There was still something about thy mouth which did not satisfy him. He looked at his Benson, was trying to get it right for a hot sec before he finally got the vibe. Then he just dropped 2 sick strokes, and Loki finished it. The face he'd been trying to cop all morning was lit, and he wondered if Marjorie would see it the same way as him. Later that morning, Marjorie slid into the studio again, thinking she'd catch him painting. But, he was drawing some real fire when she hit him and didn't even look up. The face she thought he drew at breakfast was gone, and this new face was Loki there, the hint of something else beneath. Frank's always drawn with extreme care, but for real, it took him a minute. "What's good?" Marjorie asked. "It's moving slow, but I'm working hard," he said. He stepped back and let her see the portrait. He added some new details since she left, like the background was straight fire. Bruh, it's wild," she said. "It's exactly how you Loki sit at a table." Frank looked up. "Yeah, I wiped that face out right after you left and sketched what I wanted to draw, but forgot to add it back in. I'll do it now. The hands are straight fire too." Marjorie was checking him out. "It looks like you're fixing a crumpled piece of paper," she said. "You think so?" Frank just shook his head. "I'm thinking the same, though." "No way. Bro, you're smoothing it out. Duh. What's up?" "What's the paper for? A program or something?" he said. He emphasized the face and stepped back again. "Look at this." Marjorie was like, "Oh, Frank, that won't do at all. You look like a convict or something crazy." Frank just chuckled a little bitter laugh. "My draw skills are on point," he said. Marjorie kept eyeing the face. "It's straight up ugly," she said. "Yet I don't see what's wrong with it. It's all you, somehow." She looked from the pic to her husband and saw that his face was all puzzled and anxious. "I got it now," she said. "You've been stressing about it so hard your face is literally looking like what you drew." "Oh, Frank, you ain't had breakfast yet. Sit down and get some sap. It's all 'cause you skipped breakfast." "Is that all?" he asked. "Is that the face of a dude who just forgot to eat his breakfast? It looks guilty to me, too." "Yes, that's why it's Loki guilty. Bruh. Your face is hella guilty, too. When you're all ate up on that gross little pipe of yours, it won't be as extra no more." Frank, was chillin' at what he had done with the air of a disinterested spectator. "It seems to me that savage over there has done something worse than not eat their breakfast," he said. "No cap. I'm going to get you some fresh tea, 'cause this is straight cold, and there's that sweet little snack dying on the plate, so to speak." Frank felt hella exhausted and hungry, and he sat down and proceeded to cut at that sweet little snack Marjorie had been low-key talking about. He had a weird sense of being still in a dream or just waking up from sleep. Which one was more real? All he knew was that the two were hella different. Suddenly he dropped his knife and fork with a loud crash and turned back to the picture again. "You?" No doubt about it. There was a super curious look in the lines of the face, especially in the mouth, which suggested guilt, and yet, as Marjorie had said, it was hella like him. Marjorie's fears and doubts came flooding back for a sec with renewed force as she looked at the face Frank drew, but she'd spent an hour out getting some fresh air and clearing her head. So she put those thoughts on pause, and her vibe towards Frank was straight fire again. She came back with a teapot of fresh tea and vibed to him while he breakfasted. "What's going on with your personality this morn?" she asked. "It seems to me that you're just as salty as you always are when you're painting." She said, "That's hella unfortunate, 'cause we got tennis at the Fortescues later, and if you're salty, it'll be a whole mood, you and Mr. F. I mean, he's a total stand killer, Marjorie." "Oh, I gotta sit this one out," said Frank. "I need to get this done. I've been grinding hard, but I ain't finished yet." "Don't be salty, dude," said Marjorie. "We come home after tea and Rev. Missa Greenock's comin' over, and we'll vibe with him." Benson failed to make himself feel no cap. He leaned back in his seat and thought no more of the portrait, right? "Oh, I forgot to tell you," she went on. "Mum wants us both to roll with her at this new crib, the Lizard, for a couple of nights. She's low, key leaving on Thursday, know what I'm saying, and I've been barely seen her. Bah! I ain't got time, fam," said Frank. "I gotta stay here with my paintin'. It's still getting lit." "I wish you'd come through," said Marjorie. Marjorie, how extra you are. I couldn't possibly go, though. But there's no reason why you shouldn't come." He suddenly sprang up. "Marjorie, tell me not to vibe with it," he said. "And if you'll do that, I'll roll with you, but I gotta keep it moving." "Frank, how extra you are. I ain't going nowhere, though. I wish you'd just chill for a couple of days and come with me. But I know we ain't even gonna agree on this. I'm low key comin', though, for one night, not two. So if I start tomorrow morning, I'll be back Friday evening. I gotta see Mom again before she leaves Cornwall." Frank walked back to the easel. "What's poppin'?" he said impatiently. "You've only made yourself look hella mad, Sis," said Marjorie, staying calm. "You often do look mad, you know, but I shouldn't advise you to paint your mad face in the picture, Kay." "Oh, Frank, I got a fire idea." "What's that?" "Why, put all that mad energy into the picture, and then you'll never be mad no more." "Oh, I'm so hyped. I thought of that." Frank had picked up the charcoal and put a few finishing lines to the face. "I drew it in carefully and freely, like it was a black and white sketch," he said. "Thea, that's what I saw all morning, except just when you were getting your breakfast on." "Oh, Frank, you do look salty," said Marjorie. "I ain't going to chill in the room with that, nor are you, 'cause you're coming for a little stroll till lunchtime. You got to see Hooper about fixin' up that gate down to the rocks, and tell him when he marks out the tennis court he got to do it straight, no chaser, and not just own thing. It's like 100 feet long. Come away out." Frank turned from the easel. "Yeah, I'll come," he said. "I ain't getting on with that just now. I don't know why, but unless I paint it how I see it, I can't even start. And I see it like that." "Well, nobody can say you've been extra with yourself," said Marjorie, keeping it real. They strolled out through the woods, full of scents after last night's rain, and already starting to turn gold and russet. A light mist still hung over the edges of the estuary, and 5 miles away at Falmouth Harbour the tall mast of the ship seemed to prick the skein of vapour like needles. The tide was up, and Covermore Benson walked past half of the Lille, iron steps down from the gate that had to get fixed, and long, brown-fingered seaweed swung back and forth in Dawe water like some dude's hands trying to feel his way up. The colours, vibes, and sound all seemed chill and low, key, and with Marjorie by him. Frank's ghostly energy was feeling the same, and they dipped into the misty vibes rather than be all high-strung and stuff. "I'm good with coming to Day Fortescue's this after," said Frank, as Day headed homeward. "Why, you know I will. There ain't nothing about it," said Marjorie. but I feel like I can't paint today. You're so extra lazy, said Marjorie inconsistently. You'd never do a thing if it wasn't for me. But you got to promise to grind hard and sensibly tomorrow, end day, next day, and when I come back I'll be expectin' to see it more than half done. Sensible? Ain't no ting, said Frank impatiently. All good work is like a lil madness, or something I don't know what. Everything worth doing is done by homies possessed of demons. The demon of crossness been hauntin' you this mornin', said Marjorie. But you gotta chill, and don't make yourself all extra then it's real. If I can't paint it no other way, asked Frank. What are we going to do then? Now you're asking my opinion, said Marjorie triumphantly. Although you always say I know nothing about art, you're always saying that yourself. I'm a painted how I see it, said Frank. You won't like it. But if you promise to eat your breakfast at 9, lunch at 2, and don't work more than 7 hours a day, and go out less than 3, I'll take the risk, said Marjorie. Benson was low-key vibing with Miss. Fortescue's energy, ya feel? He had this effortless swag and a sick aesthetic that made Marjorie forget the major weirdness of the past 24 hours. Guy the Greens, who were chillin' with them that night, were straight-up basic. Frank said he always felt like Raffles' clouds were crushing him when he was talking to this dude, like they're all benedictory and stuff, but also kind of suffocating. Mr. Greenock was a total buzzkill, bro. He was all like, I'm trying to spread the blessing, but it feels like I'm stuck in some cloud of entitlement. Then there was Mrs. Greenock. She was straight fire, fam. She was this super bright, shiny object that made everyone want to learn from her. Her eyes were popping like they were covered in the new school American cloth buttons, and her nose was all ship like cutting through the air with ease. She asked artists questions about their art and musicians about their tunes, and she'd be low-key asking any old dude about his job too, just to keep herself busy. You know, she thought this was the key to improve her already lit intellect. Frank was all like, oh yes, she's got a point, but also kind of feeling trapped by it all. Mrs. Greenock would always throw in these sick burns about how she could remember anything anyone told her, just so she looked extra smart when people asked her questions. She was like a lioness woman, just crushing and taking all the scraps for herself. But her methods were kind of shady, fam. She'd be snooping around like a ferret, looking for her next meal. The Greens showed up on time, as per usual, and Mrs. Greenock was already trying to annex Frank's brain, 'cause he knew more about art than his wife. She had this sick baritone voice and delivery that just drew you in. I'm low-key embarrassed, she said, but when my girl Kate asked me about Leonardo, I couldn't give her the exact year, sorry, boo. Frank was all like, I'm good, I forget too. But Mrs. Greenock was all, thank you, Trevor, and then proceeded to school him on how he didn't know the date either, Loki, when you got no idea what's going on but want to know all the tea. It's always lit to remember that there's stuff you don't got to stress about. So what you think was the most iconic year in art history? Frank felt hella awkward with those weird eyes from Mrs. Greenock staring at him, and he started shuffling his feet like a noob. It'd be hella hard to say that any one year was straight fire, he said, but I gotta give it up for the Italian Renaissance, fam. Can we get some dinner? Mrs. Greenock turned her eyes up to the ceiling like she just won the lottery or something. Thanks so much for spitting that knowledge, Benny. Mr. Trevor chimed in. Yes, I'm feeling you too, Mrs. Greenock folded her napkin like it was a treasure map, and was low-key disappointed when she found out it was just regular old bread. What's good, Mitz? Trevor, if I ask you this, what's the tea on your next pick? She wanted all the deets so she could get that cultural context vibe going. That way she could be like, oh, I get it. Mr. Trevor replied, I'm doing a portrait of myself, no cap. Mrs. Greenock put down her spoon like it was filled with fire and drama, but really it was just regular old soup. Thanks so much, she gushed. Benny, you're doing the same thing, right? Remind me to hit up Harry when we get home and tell him that's a whole mood. Frank crumbled his bread like he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Mrs. Greenock was hyped. She felt like she just won a prize or something. Yes, you're speaking my language, she said. Mr. Trevor dropped the tea. You hit the nail on the head, Benny. Frank replied, exactly what I'm trying to say. Mrs. Greenock was hella stoked. This was like a testimonial to her own awesomeness, written by a professional artist. Spill the beans, more pearls, she begged. Miss Eyre. Trevor said, nah, bruh, you already got it. But Frank just shook his head. There's nothing to say. I'll show you when it's done in a couple of days. Yo Benson was low, key trying to chill, but he stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't want to lose control, you feel. All these wild thoughts and ideas went off in his head, and he was low, key about to cry out loud. He looked up at Marjorie, and she knew something was off. So she hit Mr. Greenock's wife with a point they were discussing. Meanwhile, Benson got his life together, but made it clear that Mrs. Greenock would never set foot in his crib again. They had a little beef about asking the vicar to dinner, and Marjorie was all, well, we always do this, but Frank gave in 'cause he's extra weak. Poor Mrs. Greenock went and burned her bridges, and Benson was like, it ain't got your back. When they left, Mr. Greenock got his freak on in the feather bed, but he wouldn't get turned with his wife, who was hella reckless. He quit drinking and smoking, but still wanted to vibe with Frank some more. It's rare to find someone like you around here, said Benson. Yeah, most visitors are just tourists who ain't trying to have real conversations, replied Mr. Greenock. And we get a lot of folks coming through the churchyard where all these legendary homies are buried, but they just leave. Frank was like, I've seen so many names on those graves, it's trippy. Miss Greenock went on about how it's deep thinking, that all them brilliant minds are at rest in that cemetery. Then he dropped a lyric from Mrs. Greenock. Green grows the grass on their graves. Benson was dead, laughed out loud, but Mr. Greenock kept going. He said his wife's poems were lit with symbols and harness language, frank, harmonious language. You're always surrounded by poetry, and Mr. Greenock was all about how it ain't easy being a poet. They talk about the dangers of their craft, like getting caught up in drama and whatnot. Benson's like super easy to get famous for, and on the other hand, it's hella discouraging not having anyone to show you. Girl, I'm low, key guessing Mrs. Greenock is most exposed to some major drama, said Frank, wilding out a bit. You're trying to say that, though, said the vicar, waving his hand in appreciation. Like, for real, some of her verses have been getting some actual attention from that local paper, and she's trying to drop a small book of verse idyls. Greenock got up 'cause Frank and him were low, key done with the convo, and they all went over to the ladies. Mrs. Greenock was hella sensitive when Frank dropped the tea about her upcoming book, but she cooled off quick to spit some real talk about the moonlit sea and asked if anyone had ever painted a scene like that. Frank gave her side eye and started spitting facts. In this wild world, he said, we gotta convince ourselves first, not the whole world. What does any one opinion even matter? Their praise is way more cringeworthy than their hate. Frank met a critic once at dinner, and TB, it was a whole vibe. He was all about praising his art for the wrong reasons, only talking to people who get it. You can't criticize someone's art if you don't know what you're doing, he said. Girl, when your poems seem basic or ugly to you, and you're like, you just want to write something that don't suck, then you'll be all about yourself. Frank was low-key loving watching Mrs. Greenock get shook by his real talk. Mrs. Greenock was hella confused by Frank's honesty. She was all about the cultured artist vibe, not this wild, in your face speak. She put on her gloves like she was shielding herself from a harsh wind. Loki Benson's voice got hella loud as he kept going on about how art is super real, no cap. If it's true or it's not, that's the T, he said. And if we put even a little bit of fake in there, the whole vibe is wok. He was trying to be all truthful, like you said at dinner, and show what's good without holding back. You would probably low-key hate the pic 'cause it's hella harsh, but Benson knows life ain't all sunshine. Only the people who love us know our true selves. Hey, sorry, I'm talking too much, he said as his vibe softened up when he looked at Marjorie. I got a bit carried away. Just then, Marjorie started singing, and Mrs. Greenock was all shook, like she asked for bread but got thrown spaghetti instead. She was hella hurt and just want to be left alone, but Marjorie's voice made her chill out, and she finished getting her gloves on and looking fresh. Before they left, she was good to thank Frank for the convo and remind him about that picture he promised to show her. I'll hit you up when it's done, said Frank. Marjorie's leaving tomorrow, and I'm thinking it'll be done in 3 or 4 days max. Chat by Marjorie dipped out early next morning, 'cause it took a whole day to get from Penalva to the Lizard via them Cornish lines. Frank drove her to the station, promised not to work too much, and all that jazz. He was looking good again, talking about the portrait without drummer. But when they saw the train coming, he freaked out hard like a little kid clinging to Marjorie. Marjorie, you'll come back tomorrow, right? Frank asked. Bruh, do you gotta leave it all? Loki stoked. She thought Frank hella gotten over his irrational fears, 'cause he was being super himself during the drive. But she's straight up determined to make this happen no matter what. If you yield once, you're setting yourself up for a world hurt, and she ain't about that life. Frank got to confront these deep-seated fears of his, and the only way to do it is by facing them head on. He needs proof that personalities don't just disappear like ghosts when they're not looking. But honestly, Frank's fear was the one thing he never mentioned to her. Losin. Her was scarier than Losin himself. Frank, bruh, don't be a simp, she said. Here's the train. Have you labeled my bag? I'll catch up with you tomorrow for real. And with another whistle and puff of steam, that train was ghosted. Frank drove home like his life depended on it. Marjorie was gone, and now he had one thing to focus on, and time was just a waste if he didn't use it right. The horses were flying over the hard road, but Frank still pushed him harder than necessary. When they pulled up, Frank jumped out, leaving the reins behind, and headed straight to his studio. His worst self was chillin' in the corner, and he dove into work with nothing holding him back. Today was all about making it happen. No more waiting around for inspiration. The evil face he painted looked at that yellow program like it owned the place, and those long fingers smoothed out its creases like they were in a relationship or something. Desire and fulfillment? Yeah, it was all there, and his soul was low-key vibbin' with it. He knew the devil's got him, but when you're alone, he's even stronger than when you've got friends watching your back. Marjorie Bean away was like a switch flipped, and now Frank was working solo like never before, but in a good way. There he was hella absorbed in his art, eaten all the food in sight, but only for like 5 minutes at a time when they brought it to him. As the hours went by, he started realizing that this whole thing was correct. Frank's got some deep-seated fears that need to be addressed, and he's finally doing something about it. Benson was low-key freaking out about this other fear he'd never talked about to nobody. His inner self was straight up merging with the portrait, like drips of nasty water, his whole past life just pouring all around him. He thought he saw Marjorie in the distance, but she was ghosting on him. She wasn't even feeling the vibe of the danger risen up. It was going to be too late soon. The first eve after the sun dipped below the horizon, and he couldn't paint no more. Benson face planted onto the sofa. His last few days' work was staring back at him like a hot mess, all red glow from the sunset still visible, but like the colours were all whack now. Frank felt hella drained, like after a long night of being up and feeling straight pain. He just want to forget everything for a sec so he can catch some Z's, take an hour or two out of his life, you know? But this pain was standing in front of him, own him like it had its own stranglehold. Maybe his nerves were all messed up from working too hard, but for real, Frank thought the portrait still looked fire, even though the light was getting low. He was sitting there, wondering, half hoping he could believe it, when suddenly the figure cast a lil shadow on the background that he hadn't put there. It went from left side to right side like magic, and Frank was all, wait, what's good? At that moment, he knew exactly what fear felt like, that cold, clutchy stuff that hits your heart hard. He sat there for a sec, frozen, expectant to hear it whisper something in his ear. Then he had to muster up some major strength to get up and check the portrait. He turned it around so the shadow was on the right side, and then he just chillaxed and left the room. That night, Frank had a wild dream that was straight out of the studio, all natural, like, but also super weird, man. The next morning, he wasn't even sure if it happened or not. He dreamed he went back to the studio, and everything was still exactly how he'd left it. The portrait on the wall, his brushes and palette in their spots, the lights shining bright, the day's paper on the table. Benson felt straight exhausted, both mentally and physically, and all he wanted was Marjorie, but she was ghosting again. He picked up the yellow program from Cafe Chantant and put it with Jekyll and Hyde, and just left M there on the shelf. Benson was low, key stuck in this weird loop. You feel he was thinking about his old life, but then this intense hate crept up on him, like, for real. He tried to trash the whole thing, but it was all tough as nails, so he just gave up. He went through the motions of the day, but still couldn't shake off that anxiety. When night fell, Benson sat on the couch, staring blankly at what he'd done. That shadowy vibe from before came back to haunt him, and he was low-key terrified. Then Marjorie walked in, and he was all shook up like, oh, Marjorie, I'm so glad you're here. He was trying to convince her not to leave, 'cause this whole experience was messing with his head. Marjorie was all, what's going on? And Benson was like, this place is straight up haunted and they won't bother me no more. Marjorie was all, what ghost? But Benson was serious. He took the portrait, that one thing that's been messing with his head, and wheeled it away from view. Marjorie wanted to see it again, but Frank was like, nah, not tonight. Fam, he said, it was too lit up for her eyes, and she wouldn't want to see its weirdness. Marjorie was all, okay, but Benson could tell she was low-key intrigued. So they stepped out onto the terrace, and Marjorie noticed Frank's face was all tired and anxious. She didn't know what was going on, but there was something about him that made her want to step back. It was like he was hidden something, and she knew she'd seen it before, like in his sketch from 2 days ago. But then she just shook it off and kept it moving. Herself together, if she were low-key freaking out about those ghostly fears too, the allowance of sanity between them would not be enough for daily vibes. Frank was hella onto it right away. You're all messed up too, he said. Even you ghost me. Marjorie took hold of his arm. Don't even talk like that, Sis, she said. I don't know what's popping with you. I know what's the tea with you. You've been grinding all day and not chilling out. Yeah, I feel me, he said. But never mind that now. I got my girl back. Marjorie, do you really have a soft spot for me, or are you just trying to play it cool? Frank, what's good? She asked. I'm low-key tripping out, and I don't know what I'm saying, he said. I've been working too hard, and I got hella confused. He turned to gaze at the sunset on the west. How fire is this view? He exclaimed. I wish I were a landscape painter. But you're more turned up, Marjorie. But it's safer to be a landscape painter for real. Marjorie stopped and faced him. No? Frank spilled the tea. Have you been out since I left you yesterday morning? No. How many hours have you been grinding each day? I don't know, man. I didn't even check my watch. All day, probably, and the days are hella long. Terribly long, and the nights too. The nights are even longer, but one can't work then. Marjorie was shook, and being shook, she got salty with herself and him. Oh, you're really getting on my nerves, she said, stamping her foot. You overwork yourself and don't take care of your health. You've got the family drama, you know. And then you tell me the house is haunted and conjure up all sorts of wild thoughts about losing your mind, freaking yourself and me out. Frank, it's whack. Frank looked up suddenly at her. You too. Are you feeling anxious too? God help me if you are feeling it too. No, I'm not feeling it, said Marjorie, but I'm hella salty about you. You're no better than a lil kid. Marjorie, he said in his lowest voice, I'll never touch picture again if you're down with that. Tell me to delete it, and we can go on a getaway together. I've been grinding too hard. Or it would be better if you went quiet and chopped it up. I don't want to deal with it. It's hella toxic. No, cried Marjorie. That's the last thing I'd do. And Loki's saying you want a holiday. You've just had 2 months of rest. But that's no reason why you should overwork yourself. Of course, anyone can go crazy if they want to. It's all about whether you think you're losing it. Marjorie, spill the truth, said Frank. Do you think I'm losing my mind? Of course not, she said. I only think you're hella extra. But I've seen people like you before, like when your cousin had a meltdown last year. Loki, I've been Loki Vibbin with Benson since forever. No cap. They just chillin' for a second, then Frank starts laughing like it's natural or something. Marjorie, you're doing me good. Fam. He says, I've been hella lonely without you. Marjorie's all like, and Loki's silly too. Gee, Frank's all, maybe I am. Anyways, Benson likes hearing him say that because she's all about keeping it real. She's worried if the portrait is whack though. Frank's all, is it whack? And Benson's like, nah, bruh, it's lit. Frank's all sudden and stuff. It's not just like me, it's me. He's feeling safe 'cause she's chillin' with him. But then Marjorie's all, peace out fam, I'ma leave you to your thing. Frank's all, I guess it don't matter. But he's still hyped about the portrait. Benson's like, you're just being extra. Gee. The next day, she's going to take over his schedule, make sure he gets his morning solo time. After lunch, they're going to hit up those creeks again. It's almost dinner time anyway, when it's just them, and the portrait in the studio after dinner is cool, but tonight, Frank's all, no way. Marjorie, please. Benson's like, Frank's all pale and stuff. What crime? Marjorie bursts out laughing. You're so extra G. Frank's all, oh, I see. And then he's like, can we not go to the studio tonight? Marjorie's all, chill, fam. She's determined not to get distracted and ruin her vibe. So she just laughs it off, moves on. Anyway, Frank's been chillin' with Benson while paintin', but he don't like being alone for a sec. Benson's all, he got you, G. The painting part's always kind of trying at him, though. Benson below, key exposing himself when he paints, yeah, feel. His whole soul is out there, and it's like super vulnerable, you know. He needs someone who got his back, and that's why I'm here for him, Marjorie. When them religious folk hit the church, or a revival, they're all over the place, 'cause their souls are on the surface. It's whack to be around too many new people when your vibe is like that. Nobody knows what kind of influence they'll have on you, but I know mine got Benson's back. I wish my vibe would chill him out a bit, she said. Marjorie went to bed hella happy except for one thing. Frank was straight up extra about his art, and she was low, key worried he'd lose himself in it. She knew Benson liked to get nervous, hyped when working on pics, and the way he talked all crazy about personalities and stuff. It was cute how much he wanted her around. But Marjorie drew a natural conclusion. Frank was more in his zone than usual. But there was one little problem. She got super uncomfortable whenever Benson came at her with that extra enthusiasm. She told herself it was just her own weirdness, not his, and that trying to fix him while being hella imperfect herself was straight up whack. I'm so extra for thinking this, she said to herself as she settled in bed. Benson's got his thing, and I know it's whack, but I'll still be here for him. Then another thought came crashing into her brain. What's Benson hiding? What do you know about my business? The two thoughts lit up like a firework. She felt that spark, even if she tried to brush it off. She sent Benson's breakfast to him, but ate hers alone in her morning room. The fact that she was with him calmed him down, and he slept deep and not having any crazy dreams. As he walked along the passage to his studio, he felt like he wasn't even scared about what he'd find there. Like, how could a ghost of something be all bad against real life? Real life vibe is good life better than evil life. Evil life. But when he went into the studio and put the portrait back in its spot, his mind just flipped and became all messed up again. The power Benson had been working on for days was getting too lit. When Marjorie was with him, she kept him from doing the bad stuff. But when it was just him alone, everything that's good got sucked into a dark pit. He's like some savage who makes an idol out of wood or stone and then bows down to it, thinking it's in charge. All morning Marjorie was trying not to go see Benson because she knew he needed to figure some stuff out on his own. He was scared of being alone, so she just chilling at home doing her thing, trying to think she's busy. But when the clock struck one, she was like, finally, and closed her book. She went to the studio where Benson was standing with his back to the door, not even looking up from what he was working on. Marjorie came up behind him and saw what Benson didn't want to show her, and now it made sense why. He's always flying through his art, but never in a rush, so she knew exactly what the final pick would be like. The idea was locked down for real. She jumped out of her skin and let out a cry that was all involuntary, because she finally got it, and Benson's new masterpiece is straight fire. It's his face, bro. It's the same face Marjorie saw on Benson the night before when he ran to meet her in the studio and she was low. Key freaked. That face is of a dude who suppressed his good side for some other stuff. I'm low, Key freaking out over Benson still. It was his face in the painting, and when Marjorie turned to look at Frank, she saw that it was literally him in there, like every line of his features was screaming something out. "Frank, what's good?" she cried, but he just kept on painting. He wasn't even listening. He murmured under his breath, "Wes, I'm a mess." Marjorie was shook. She was hella scared. She lost it, fam. She started freaking out. Then she was all like, "Frank, Frank," and cursed her own stupid decision. That wasn't going to work, bruh. She grabbed onto his arm, tried to snap him back to reality, and said, "Dude, stop painting. Look at me, like now." This time he actually listened. His hand dropped the brush, and it just fell on the floor. His face changed, too. Those hard lines softened up, and he looked all vulnerable. "Marjorie, what's poppin'?" he asked, all confused. Marjorie swooped in and turned that painting around so its face was against the wall. "You've been grinding for a bit, Benson," she said. "It's time to take a break." Frank picked up the brush he dropped and examined it like it was some kind of miracle. "This paint is hella full," he said, all clueless. Marjorie played along, too. "You usually do that with dry brushes, don't you?" "Now, I've been painting all morning, so boy." Frank's eye landed on the easel, and Marjorie was like, "Hey, Benson, leave it alone." She knew he was about to get back to work. "You're not going anywhere till this afternoon," she said. Frank rubbed his eyes. "I'm hella tired," he admitted. "I don't want to go for a walk. Can I just chill here?" Marjorie was all okay for 10 minutes, then you got to get up. Frank looked out the window and went full on fanboy. "This morning is straight fire," he said. "Those trees are looking all dreamy too." He started getting all existential on her. "I think I've been sleepwalking." "Marjorie, what's real?" Marjorie played it cool, though. "Did you have some weird dreams?" she asked, trying to keep it 100. "Yeah, I was just going to work so hard, but I guess I got caught up in something else." Frank seemed kind of spaced out. He didn't really hear what Marjorie said. He kept going like, "I don't know, man. Maybe I shouldn't have started this portrait. I'm low-key scared, fam." Broke in Marjorie suddenly. "Afraid of letting herself consent, I tell you that you got to go on with it." Frank got his vibe back at the sound of her hella excited voice. "You don't get it," he said. "I know I'm putting myself out there if I do this. I told you about one of those risks I was talking about, didn't? It's like partly I was sketching all morning, and I thought I was in danger the whole time. I was worried I'd lose myself or become someone else entirely. I ran the risk of losing you, myself all I care for, except my art. And with a major on it? Asked Marjorie. With the biggest and all that red sauce. The scarlet letter, said Marjorie winningly, which you were vibbin' last week. That accounts for that symptom. Go on and spill more tea. I know you think it's all hell absurd, said Frank, but I'm a better judge than you. I know myself better than you do better, please God, than you'll ever get to know me. However, you won't understand that. But with regard to what I told you, when I paint a picture, you think the end result is just me and some art, but it's actually just me alone. There's only me, and inasmuch as there's a picture, there's less of myself here in my clothes. A picture is oil, paint, said Marjorie, and you cop that at shops. Wes, and brushes too, said Frank. But a picture is not just oil, paint, and brushes. It's like so much more than that. Go on, said Marjorie. Well, have I got any right to do this? In other pictures it hasn't mattered, because one recovers by degrees, and one doesn't put all their self into them. But painting this one feels is different. I'm going all in, slowly but inevitably. I'll put everything I am into it at least, what I know while I'm painting, and what happens to that thing here. He pointed to himself. I have no idea. All the time I was painting, that thought with others was with me, as if it had been written in fire on my brain. Have I got any business taking risks I can't even estimate? I know I've got a certain duty to you and others, and is it right me to risk all that for some painted thing? He stood up. Marjorie, he said, that's not all. Want to know the real tea? There's another risk I'm running much more important and way scarier. May I tell you? No, you can't, said Marjorie. Straight up. It just makes those fears even realer for you to talk about it. You won't spill the beans. And now we're low, Key leaving. But listen, Frank, she said, standing up and facing him. Hey, as you said just now, you know nothing of the risk you're running. Or you feel like it's up to you, fam. And I'm low, Key thinking the same thing. I ain't gonna lie, but even if it's straight fire, I might not be here for it. Are you an artist or just a scared lil ghost hunter? I need you to finish it, 'cause it'll help you realize how many wild ideas are running through your head, and when they all don't come true, maybe you can chill out a bit more. Same reason you're hella scared of finishing it. You're worried about losing your personality or something, but I got you. Lose that extra drama and we both win. Don't worry about what's got you shook, fam. Let's just keep it moving. All right? Enough for now. Let's take a stroll till lunch. Then we'll hit the ground again after lunch, and maybe you can get some more work done before the sun sets. It was a whole mood getting through that combo with Benson. He looked at that art like it was some kind of dark magic or something, and I know how he feels. It's got a strong effect on him. But I ain't worried about what happens next, fam. When he's vibbing on his art, he can be hella extra, but when it's over, he's chill again. Benson knew she was getting under her skin, but she was all about getting that portrait done. She low, Key hoped it'd be a relief when it was finished, and she wasn't wrong. Frank got up, looking super docile for once, which gave Marjorie some major questions. What's going on? Benson usually gets salty when he's forced to leave his art, but this time he just came with her like no problem. He said he'd come 'cause he always would, and then he saw that easel and freaked out for a sec. Before Marjorie could stop him, he flipped the canvas around, and suddenly Benson was all smiles again. Check it out, he whispered, like the art was listening. That's what I've been seeing all morning. Oh, Benson wasn't even there, and I was low-key thinking I shouldn't be painting, right? Wait, Margie, hold up, I want to finish that pic I was on. His face got super pale, and this whole I'm a bad person vibe fell over it like a mood ring. You're trying to psycho me out with your art, he said. Spit out my palette, fam. It'll take a sec. But Marjorie swooped in as usual, grabbed his stuff from the table, and made a hasty exit through the door. Frank was all. Hey, give me that palette back, but still low-key staring at the painting. Marjorie took one deep inhale of emotional pain and then burst out laughing, like half hysterical, half lol. Benson, you look exactly like Irving in Macbeth when he's all dramatic, she said. This is a sad sigh. I never saw anyone sadder. He looked over at her, and the whole guilt trip was gone. What was I even saying? Benson asked. You said, give me the daggers. Oh, that's Lady Macbeth's thing. Here, take it. Frank walked up to her like a sheep, but as soon as he got outside, Marjorie slammed the door shut and stood triumphantly in front of it. Here's your drama, Benson, she said. Finish that pit, but don't lose your mind. And if you start acting all Macbethy again, I'ma die from boredom or become a fool on Lady Macbeth. Either way, we'll be two messed up souls. Now, Benson's coming out. Get it together, fam. I was low-key vibbing with the dead leaves when I saw Benson's pic sitting on that coffee table. Every now and then a rabbit would scurry out of there 'cause it was getting hella real quick, or this young cock pheasant was just chillin', looking all kinds of shook. Marjorie was totes surprised how much of a relief it was to have Frank away from that picture. The way he looked at her in the portrait was straight up creepy, and it was low-key scaring her more than she was willing to admit, even to herself. But for real, nothing was going to make her give up on getting Benson to finish that painting, even if all the ghosties from Decameron were sitting in his peepers. She was hella convinced it was just her hubby, his expression, and she wasn't about that life. No way. How was she going to let some paint bring him down? She didn't believe in all that extra stuff, you feel. A paint job ain't going to change the painter's vibe or nothing. But honestly, she was getting hella anxious and tired, and it was low-key weird. She was like, dude, this is just getting done, not losing yourself. Decidedly, she didn't believe in that ghost thing, but for real, she couldn't help wondering what the other fear was he was trying to keep from her. It was all vague in her head, but she was pretty sure it had something to do with that weird shiver she got when she saw him last night. And then there was this image of the sea risen up its dead. For real, it was all kind of hazy, but at least she knew she was all about getting done Benson and done with it. The thing was, though, she couldn't shake that feeling. Something's gonna become clear to her when it does. And when it does, she'll be like, I gotta make a new move. Right now, she just wanted him to finish the painting and done with it ASAP. But for real, having Benson around was all that mattered. She knew him and loved him way more than any paint job or ghost story ever could. He looked hella tired, but in a cute way. And when he smiled at her from across the water, she was totes there, vibbing with him. It's like that first day we came here. Margie, he said one time, and for real it felt just as good. Loki, did you feel? Why, that I got you all to myself at last, and I'm low-key over it. Bruh, what's good? Asked Marjorie. Frank slammed the boat into a little hollow by the creek, now basically summer dry, and just sat down on the bank above her. Margie, gee, can we vibe about this? He said. I'm hella calm. No cap. And I'm not tripping over anything. We ain't got to be worried about that thing. Let's talk about the picture all chilled. Frank, don't be a simp, she said with a smile. You know exactly how I feel about it. You're always on my wavelength, but, let's not be too extra, okay? Marjorie stood up and put her hand on his knee. Frank, you're not ghosting me, right? There's nothing in the world that could even come between us. But we gotta keep it real. If I'm all worried about some creepy vibes while we're sailing home, I ain't gonna let you bail. No way. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, and it'd be hella irresponsible if we started letting that dictate our moves. It's for your sake, not mine, but I'm down to keep the picture going so you can do what makes you happy. Frank leaned in and spoke all serious. Margie tell me to smash it, fam, and you can do whatever. Just please don't make me destroy it. Marjorie shook her head hard. Don't leave me hanging, Frank, she said. I'm all about you, but I gotta know why. You're always so turned up over your art, but that's what makes it worth it, 'cause you're killing the game and you ain't never gonna lose your touch. And if you gave up on being an artist for me, if I low-key saw any tea for telling you to stop this, I would do it. It's 'cause I care about you and all the possibilities that are coming out of this. So I'm low-key telling you to keep it going. Marjorie thought about that portrait and how it was hella similar to her husband Benson, and she was shook. But no cap. The whole thing was too wild, too extra. She didn't even know what was getting her triggered. It ain't the easy or comfy road I'm on, she continued. I recall when you shouted at me to give your palette that morning. You looked hella intense. Frank looked confused. What did I do? He asked. When did I even say that? That morning, just before we came out, you was super loud and looked like Benson in Macbeth mode. Marjorie said, I'm trying to get Benson out of your system, fam. That wild idea of yours was the original cause of all this drama. So when you're done with the picture and you know you didn't take no risks, you'll know I'm right. Frank stood up. Tomorrow might be too late, he said. Do you really tell me to keep going? Marjorie was like, Frank, don't be dramatic. You were hella chill all day. Yeah, I'm telling you to keep it going. Frank's arms dropped by his side, and for a sec he just stood there. The leaves whispered in the trees, and the stream tapped against the boat. Then the breeze dropped, and the boat swung round with the current. It was hella quiet, like no sound at all. Then Marjorie laid back in the boat and wailed. Her laugh sounded sus in her own ears. I'm sure this is one of those moments we should just hear our own hearts, but for real, I don't wanna. Come on, Frank, don't stand there like a statue. Frank slowly looked at her, but he didn't say nothing back. Marjorie paused a sec. Come, she said again, let's go a little higher. There's plenty of space. Frank pushed the boat out from the bank and jumped in. Then it's all over. I got to get home ASAP, he said. I got to get that portrait done immediately. I'm low-key dying if I don't get back to work. There's no time to waste, Margie. Please let me go, fam. He paused a sec. Margie, can you give me one kiss? He asked. Maybe. Ah, my dude, can't you just do what I ask? He had raised himself and was clinging round her neck, kissing her like crazy. But she was hella afraid of saying yes, afraid of losing her mind. I'm low-key stressed about this. Benson, can we chill? She said, unwinding her arms from around him. No, Marjorie, I gotta say no, he replied, shaking his head and grabbing an oar. Why are you being hella impatient? Can't you see I'm trying to vibe here? She asked him if he knew what time it was, but he just shrugged. I don't know, but we got to get home asap or it's going to be too dark. The wind had died down since that one lull, and when they hit the estuary it was literally silent. The wind is hella dead, he said, grabbing some sculls and rowing like a pro. The winds and stars are low-key fighting me, we won't make it. She asked him, what's good? But he just kept on rowing. What's going on? You're being super extra. He paused for a sec before saying, I gotta get back, Marjorie. I'm hella obsessed with this art piece, and you're ghosting me for some painted horror show. She was confused. Frank, what are you even talking about? You gave up on us for it. That creepy painting thingy. Please just listen to me, Marjorie. Just tell me to stop working on it. Destroy it. He leaned on his oars, waiting for her response. She asked him what's wrong with him and why he was being so extra. I think you're just having a rough day, Benson. He waited for her answer before getting back in the rowing game. The water was hissing by as the boat cut through the calm surface. Marjorie was sitting in the stern, managing the rudder, trying not to freak out on the rocks ahead. Frank's intense vibe was giving her anxiety, but she wasn't going to let it get her down. She decided that maybe he just needed some time and space, so she was chilling with letting him do his thing. When she asked when it'd be done, Benson replied, tomorrow. Tonight the most important part will be lit. Benson, just chill in the studio till it gets super dark. Okay, can't paint with you no more. Marjorie was hella hurt inside. She was supposed to sit-woo him, but he's all no. I got this. She didn't want to be extra, so she just kept quiet. They were chillin' by the creek for like half an hour when they saw that iron staircase thingy leadin' down to the rocks, and Frank beached the boat and jumped out of there. His face was all red and sweaty, but Marjorie was all dude, you should change before you get sick. But Frank's all, no way, I'm good, and starts laughing. And then he takes off like a shot, and the door to the studio just slams shut behind him. Chapter X Marjorie was more chill following Frank up to the house, because she won this round, and she didn't want to ruin the vibe. She had said no to finishing the picture or destroying it, so now she's feeling all uncertain. Like, was she right to trust her head, or should she just listen to her gut? Was Frank in some kind of danger? But where from? She couldn't even think about that. Then she started thinking about Frank's face while he was painting, and she was like, wait, what's going on here? She couldn't rationalize it at all. It was a huge relief to know it'd be over soon. The important stuff would get done in an hour or two, and Marjorie was thinking that finishing the portrait would fix Frank up real good. He wasn't feeling so hot, but she figured this was like some kind of surgery for his mental health issues, whatever that meant. For now, she just had to deal with being alone for a bit, so she did some random stuff and read some more of that weird book. Then the mail came, and there was a letter from Jack Armitage asking if he could come see the portrait, but Marjorie wasn't too sure about that. Benson was low-key freaked out about the whole ghost situation and how he could lose his personality or bring up all this drama from his past. But Frank was more chill about it, like he just wanted to avoid getting too extra. You feel. Marjorie was all good with that, 'cause it meant less stress for her. But then Frank dropped some major tea about a way more terrifying threat, and she wasn't having it, 'cause she was already shook from the first convo. There was this one time they were chillin' on the beach in New Quay, and he was trying to tell her something, but she just ghosted him, you know? Anyway, Marjorie had a major meltdown when Armitage's fam got all bent out of shape because they hadn't heard from him yet. She felt hella embarrassed about it, but like, who can blame her? It's hard to keep your cool when someone's freaking out on you. So she hit the village with her hat and sent a telegram like a sap. The sun was getting low, but she didn't want to be that person who's all like, hey, I'm trying to chill, when really she was just trying to hide from it all. She tried to play it cool, but even she could tell the laugh wasn't going to come out, because Frank's portrait was straight up, terrifying after sunset, and she was low key, scared it'd never be done. So she sent a message that was all, hey, Armitage, don't worry, I got this, which was basically code for please come ASAP, I'm hella stressed. She hit the street, trying to get back home before it got dark. But Mrs. Greenock was all up in her grill asking about the portrait and whether it was wook oak enough. Marjorie was like, nah, Frank's just hyped about it, which was code for I have no idea what's going on. Benson was low-key hyped about seeing it when it's done, said Marjorie. It's gonna be lit tomorrow, bruh, she added. Mrs. Greenock just vibed with her, saying Benson was a total genius and his personality was straight fire. You're walking home, though, asked Mrs. Greenock. Can I roll with you for a sec? I've been grinding hard too, and I need some fresh air and maybe a brainwave or two. They took the scenic route to the lodge gates, where Mrs. Greenock was all about keeping it real, dishing out knowledge like a pro, and making the time pass with some fire views of the sunset. But when Marjorie got to her crib, she was all, Mrs. Greenock was right. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and now the twilight was creeping in like a thief. Marjorie was quick to get up to Benson's studio, where he was chilling on the other side of the room, staring at this crumpled paper with his face all scrunched up. She could see that look of guilt and horror on his mug. It was familiar, but also super unsettling. Benson, you can't paint by that light, she said. But then she saw something moving next to her elbow and turned around like a boss. Benson was sitting in the corner, staring blankly at nothing, thinking he was in front of himself in the mirror. She thought it was her husband, and for a hot second neither of them said or did it anything. Then Benson got up from his spot, and Marjorie felt like she was being pulled into his vibe, turning to face him with all the emotions. I've been working hard tonight, he said. Almost done. Marjorie went back to check out the portrait again, and now it was clear as day. Benson had been playing her like a fool. The light from outside didn't cast any shadows on his face, and the shadow on his mug was all off to the left. Benson paused, and Marjorie knew her telegram would be whacked. It was just her and Benson now. If help came, it'd have to come from her. She got it in a split second, the vibe she felt when Benson was around, the weird looks he gave her, the stuff he used to talk about. It all clicked into place. The fear, the confusion, it was all connected. And Marjorie realized that Benson had been scared of something evil, just his like she was, but his passion for art made him want to ignore it, and Benson got pulled in two. Loki thought he was ghosted, but now he's Loki back, and that's a whole mood, fam. So, like, Benson spoke up again, and he said it in a slow V because he was trying to find his words. You see how we're lit? He asked, all serious, like, it's no wonder you thought I was someone else, though you can't even see the resemblance when it's all dark and messy, duh. He paused for a sec, then kept going. This painting is straight fire, Margie the only one of its kind in the whole world. We got to take it to that art show next year as a tribute because it's truly a masterpiece. I'm like totally a genius, right? Benson said, all cocky, like. Frank took a pause, but Marjorie just stayed silent. Bruh. Then he kept talking about how there were some things about himself she didn't know before the real deal, you know. You wanted to tell you, but you weren't vibbin' with it, he said. Now you see it in the painting in my face, though, but tomorrow it's going to be clear as day, even in your dreams. Says he dropped some knowledge about corpses rising from the dead when they hear gunfire. No joke, fam. He was low-key totes proud of himself for bringing those ghostly vibes up. Marjorie took a step closer, though her body was all, no, I don't want to do this, you feel. She said, Frank? Wait, Jimmy, a sec. Benson said, all calm like, I got you, Margie. I got to tell you more about this painting and its meaning. Artists are supposed to judge their own work, but critics need to have the tea before they can spill it. Artists know the real deal, though. He kept going about how those judgment books are actually just faces the real ones, bro, and that his book's like an illuminated manuscript, all deep and whatnot. Frank started talking about Paris, the good and the bad vibes, and Claire, who was all potato but deadly. He said he saw her in hell, too, at this morgue place. It wasn't pretty, fam. Don't worry about it, he said, trying to chill her out. But Marjorie just shook her head because she didn't want to know the tea. Benson finished off his story with some serious Loki vibes. Being in hell ain't all that lit, and some art's better left unseen. I'm low-key obsessed with Benson, and he's totes into her too. There's still hope, though. He picked up this little yellow program he painted and was turning over in his hands like heat won't break. Fam, but then he got all worked up about not remembering some chapters they wrote together. Margie's all dude. I forgot we even did that, but she's low-key trying to play it cool. She stops him from searching the room and just goes to hug him. Love is winning. Benson's feeling all emotional, and Margie's like, you asked me if I want you to keep working on this pic, right? And I'm like, hell yeah, but now I gotta tell you it's work. And tear it up, burn it. She's trying to be all supportive, but then she sees the portrait and is hella shook. She thought that was Benson, but now she's all, this ain't him at all. Frank's all, no way. I gotta finish this thing, and starts talking about how he put his life into it. He's like, I'm the real deal. I made that pic come to life. Margie's all hokey, dude, you're a genius or something, but she's still trying to get out of there, 'cause it's too dark and spooky. Yes, Benson is low-key lit and very important. T-Bay. Like, they're literally as good now and even better than the chapters you wrote there. No cap. She slid her hand through Frank's arm, and she was low-key pouring all her feels into that touch. Come, she said, they ain't here. For a sec, she felt Frank's arm tremble under the loving squeeze of her fingers, but he was all quiet and didn't move. You asked me to kiss you this af, Benson, she said, and now I'm asking you to kiss me. Kiss me on the lips, 'cause we're husband and wife, G. And standing next to that wild horror, he gave her a kiss. And now come out for a hot sec, said Marjorie, for I gotta tell you something. Frank was all in, and they walked out onto the terrace in silence. Let's sit down here, she said, and I'll tell you what you forgot. Those other chapters, asked Frank. I'm hella low on them, Benson, said Marjorie. The picture is not complete yet. Yeah, those other chapters, said Frank. They're super short. Just this, that I loved you. And I love you now. I know what your fear was. It was fear for me, not for yourself. Bruh. You thought putting something in the pic would make me mad, but I got you. Marjorie felt another tremor go through Frank's arm, but still he kept it 100. You said I didn't get what you meant, she said. But now I'm like, oh yeah, I feel you. And you two were hella out of touch if you thought anything could make a difference in my love for you. We all got something, not fire, to look at, but it's what we stand or fall by that matters our beautiful chapters. Gee. Frank was shook and didn't say nothing. You told me I didn't understand what you meant, said Marjorie, but now I'm like, you get it. And you two were hella out of touch if you thought you could delete those chapters from the picture. They belong to us both, Benson, and I won't let them die. Frank was all confused, but then he felt her arms around him, and his hands were clasped around her neck. Margie. Margie. He whispered, did you get those chapters now? My God, how little I knew. You was low-key ghosting me, and I thought I lost you forever, but then she dropped the tea. You asked me why I loathed what we were painting. Why did I loathe it? Frank said. Because it yas? Benson was hella shook. Let's ghost the studio, said Marjorie. No way, no day. She told Frank to come with her, but he was low-key freaking out about it. In the room, there was a trophy made of knives and swords that Frank had bought in Soden No Cap. Marjorie grabbed one of those bad boys, a thick steel dagger, and put it down on the table next to a lamb. She was like, open the door, Frank. Then she handed him the dagger and stood opposite the picture with the lamp. Now or never, she said. He was feeling the edge of that dagger for a hot second, looking at Marjorie, before he went full on savage and grabbed the easel with one hand and plunged the dagger through the face. You're a straight-up devil, you, he barked. Then he started cutting and stabbing the picture in like 50 spots. The torn shreds were all over the ground, and Frank was literally trampling on them or picking them up to rip up them again. It was a whole fight. By the time Jack Armitage showed up the next day, everything was hella torn apart. Marjorie didn't even tell him why she sent for him, but he was low-key grateful that he came because she was all genuine and stuff. By the time Jack Armitage showed up the next day, everything was hella torn apart. Marjorie didn't even tell him why she sent for him, but he was low-key grateful that he came because she was all genuine and stuff.